The microphone screeched when my father tapped it, and the whole banquet hall turned toward him. It was my cousin's engagement party. Gold streamers hung from the ceiling. The smell of cardamom tea and warm buffet trays floated through the room. I was standing near the back, holding a paper cup when he said it. "This is our eldest daughter," he began, gesturing toward me with a thin smile. "She chose a simple life, just a school teacher." A few people chuckled softly. Not cruel, just polite. My mother leaned closer to the aunt beside her and added, "Some children are ambitious, others prefer comfort." Comfort. The word settled over me heavier than the silk shawl on my shoulders. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct them. I simply nodded as if they were describing the weather. Have you ever felt your whole identity reduced to a single sentence in a crowded room? The applause for my cousin rose again, louder than before, and I stood there smiling, as if nothing inside me had shifted. The next morning, my alarm went off at 5:40, the same soft chime I had used for years because anything louder made my chest tighten. I got up quietly so my neighbors wouldn't hear the floorboards creak. My apartment was small, clean, and stubbornly mine. A chipped mug by the sink, a row of lesson plans clipped to the fridge, a cardigan hanging on the chair because I always forgot to put it away. I packed my lunch like I always did. Flatbread rolled in foil, a small box of dates, the kind of food that doesn't spill and doesn't smell strong in a staff room. By 6:30, I was on the bus, watching the city wake up in layers. On shop shutters lifting, a man sweeping dust off the sidewalk like it mattered. School kids in wrinkled uniforms, half asleep, tugging at their backpacks. I liked this hour. It didn't ask me to prove anything. At school, the guard nodded at me the way he always did, respectful and quiet. I returned it. Then I walked down the corridor that smelled like chalk, old books, and floor cleaner, and I reminded myself, as I often did, that the first 5 minutes of the day decide everything. My classroom was my calm place. Not perfect, not fancy, but steady. A faded poster of the solar system, a jar of sharpened pencils, a small plant that I kept alive out of pure stubbornness. The students were coming in noisy and hungry for attention, and I was ready. That's the part my parents never understood. I didn't settle. I built something that held other people up. Around mid-morning, the principal sent for me. His office always felt too cold, even when the rest of the building was warm. A ceiling fan turning slowly, files stacked like silent threats. He didn't ask me to sit. "I got a call," he said, adjusting his glasses. "From the district office." My stomach tightened. Not from fear exactly, but from experience. Calls like that never meant, "We appreciate your work." He lowered his voice like he was doing me a favor. "They're assigning the new model classroom project to another teacher." I blinked. But I submitted the plan. "I know." He tapped the paper on his desk without looking at it. "Your plan was strong." "So why?" He exhaled, impatient, like I was being slow on purpose. "Because they want someone with the right profile, someone who looks good in photos, someone who can represent the school." Represent. I understood the word without him explaining it. My clothes were neat but simple. My phone was old. I didn't have the polished connection some teachers had. I didn't network. I taught. "Who are they giving it to?" I asked. He hesitated, then said the name like he was trying to make it sound normal. "Ms. Rania, new teacher, 2 months in, always wearing bright lipstick, always posting reels in the staff room, always laughing a little too loudly when the supervisor visited." I stood there, hands by my sides, and felt something sharp move under my ribs. "Sir," I said carefully, "is this about performance?" He didn't answer directly. He just rubbed his forehead and said, "Don't make this difficult. It's not personal." Isn't that what people say when they're choosing convenience over fairness? I nodded once because arguing in that office would change nothing. Then I turned to leave, and as my hand touched the doorknob, he added quietly, "Also, the district team is visiting next month. Try to look more presentable." Presentable. I walked back to my classroom with my face steady, but my thoughts weren't. The hallway felt louder than before. The children's voices bounced off the walls. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher. And for the first time in a long time, I caught myself wondering something I didn't like. How long had people been deciding my value based on how I looked instead of what I did? At first, I told myself it was just one decision, one project, one missed opportunity. Schools had politics, offices had favorites. It didn't mean anything larger, did it? But small things began to stack up in quiet ways. The week after the principal's conversation, the district supervisor visited. I had prepared my class carefully. We were working on a reading circle. The students had practiced speaking clearly, waiting their turn, listening without interrupting. I wore my cleanest blue kurta and pressed it the night before. I even braided my hair differently, though I wasn't sure why. When the supervisor walked past my classroom, he paused at the door. For a second, hope flickered. Then he glanced inside, nodded briefly, and continued down the corridor. Straight to Ms. Rania's room, where laughter spilled out like background music. Later, in the staff room, I overheard two teachers whispering. "She's very dynamic," one said. "Yes. And her social media presence is impressive. The district likes that." Impressive. I opened my lunch quietly and pretended not to hear. Have you ever noticed how praise sometimes has nothing to do with the actual work? That same afternoon, the principal asked me to help design worksheets for the Model Classroom Initiative. Not lead it, not present it, just prepare the materials. "You're good at structure," he said casually as if it were a compliment. "She's better at delivery." So I stayed late that day. The building emptied. The echo of my footsteps followed me as I carried stacks of papers to the photocopy room. The machine hummed steadily, the smell of toner thick in the air. I aligned every page carefully. I wrote clear instructions. I built something solid. The next week, during the official presentation, I sat in the back of the hall as Ms. Rania spoke confidently about her innovative framework. My worksheets flashed on the screen behind her. My formatting, my examples, my quiet effort. No one mentioned my name. The applause was warm. Cameras clicked. The principal beamed. I clapped too. What would it have changed if I had stood up and said something? Would anyone have believed me, or would I have sounded small? At home that evening, my mother called. "I saw pictures from the school event," she said brightly. "That young teacher looks very polished. You should learn from her." I stared at the ceiling fan above my bed as it rotated lazily. "She knows how to present herself," my mother continued. "That matters in the real world. You've always been simple." The word again. Simple like it meant limited, like it meant invisible. And I almost told her about the worksheets, about the late nights, about the credit that quietly shifted hands. But the story felt heavy in my throat. Instead, I said, "I'm fine, Ami." After the call ended, the apartment felt smaller than usual. The ticking of the wall clock sounded louder. I looked at my stack of graded notebooks on the table and wondered something I hadn't allowed myself to ask before. Was I being overlooked? Or was I allowing it? By the third month, it no longer felt accidental. It was a pattern. When the district newsletter came out, there was a full-page spread about the Model Classroom Initiative. A glossy photo of Ms. Rania standing in front of a smartboard. The caption praised her creative leadership and innovative lesson design. I read the article twice, searching for my name. It wasn't there. Not in the acknowledgments, not in the footnotes, not even in the small print. At school, colleagues began stopping by her classroom more often. The door was always slightly open, laughter drifting into the hallway. I noticed how administrators chose to stand inside her doorway longer than anyone else's. How her opinions were asked for in meetings. How she spoke with a confidence that didn't seem to question itself. Meanwhile, my schedule quietly shifted. 2 extra classes were added to my week, a struggling section no one else wanted. The explanation was simple. "You're patient. You can handle it." Patient. Another compliment that felt like a quiet assignment. I accepted it without protest. What else was I supposed to do? Refuse and risk sounding difficult? The days grew heavier. I found myself staying later, not for recognition, but to keep up. My classroom remained steady. My students still improved. Parents still thanked me during pickup hours, pressing small smiles into their tired faces. One mother once held my hand and said, "My daughter reads to me every night now. She wasn't confident before." I carried that sentence with me for days, but inside staff meetings, something had shifted. When I spoke, people nodded politely and moved on. When she spoke, pen scribbled. How does influence get decided? By skill or by shine? One afternoon, as I passed the notice board near the entrance, I saw a printed memo pinned under a red thumbtack. District Education Award nomination. One name listed under our school. Not mine. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The corridor buzzed with students heading home. The smell of dust and chalk hung in the air. And I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, but this time it wasn't surprise. It was clarity. This wasn't about one project or one event. It was about image. About who fit the story the administration wanted to tell, and I did not. That evening, I didn't call my parents. I didn't text anyone. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the sky dim from pale orange to gray. The city lights blinked on one by one, indifferent. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask a different question. If they don't see you, do you keep standing in the same light? Or do you move somewhere else entirely? The shift didn't happen loudly. It happened in small decisions no one else noticed. I stopped volunteering for extra committees. I stopped offering to help refine presentations that would carry someone else's name. And when the principal asked for suggestions in meetings, I gave concise answers and left them there. No extra explanation, no emotional investment. I began to guard my time the way some people guard money. At 3:15, when the final bell rang and the hallway filled with the shuffle of shoes and tired voices, I packed my bag without lingering. The photocopy machine could wait, the bulletin board could stay half-finished, the school would continue without my overtime. Wasn't that what they had shown me? In class, I remained the same. I still knelt beside desks to explain fractions slowly. I still stayed back when a student struggled to pronounce a paragraph. I still wrote careful feedback in the margins of essays. My commitment to them did not shrink, but my need for institutional approval did. And there's a difference between serving people and seeking validation from systems that don't value you. I hadn't understood that before. At home, my routine grew steadier. I began waking earlier to walk before school. The air at dawn was cool and forgiving. Streetlights flickered off as the sun rose gently over the buildings. I liked that hour. It felt honest. I bought a small secondhand bookshelf and assembled it myself on a Saturday afternoon. The screws didn't align perfectly. I adjusted them patiently. The shelf stood slightly uneven, but solid. I ran my hand across it and smiled. Why had I spent so much time trying to fit into rooms that tilted away from me? My parents, meanwhile, grew quieter. They had heard about the district award nomination through relatives. The story had traveled faster than I expected. When at dinner one evening, my father asked casually, "Why didn't your school nominate you?" His tone wasn't curious, it was confirming. "I'm not the right profile," I said simply. He nodded like that made sense. "Maybe if you put yourself out there more, presentation matters." My mother added, "You've always avoided attention." Avoided, as if integrity were shyness. I didn't argue. I finished my tea, washed my cup, and left early. The night air outside their house felt thick, but I could breathe easier once I was walking alone. Emotional distance doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just the absence of explanation. Back at school, something unexpected happened. A senior teacher, Mrs. Halima, stopped me in the corridor. "You've changed," she said softly. I wasn't sure if it was criticism. "Why, in what way?" "You're calmer," she replied, "like you've stopped trying to prove something." I thought about that long after she walked away. Had I been trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided it? For the first time, the question didn't sting. It steadied me. The boundary wasn't crossed in a dramatic way. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, under fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly above the conference table. The district office had scheduled a formal review session. All department heads were present. The principal sat at the center, hands folded neatly as if rehearsed. A projector cast pale blue light against the wall. When the presentation began, my chest tightened. Slide after slide appeared on the screen. Structured lesson modules, student progress charts, assessment templates. Mine. Not just inspired by mine. Not adapted. The exact format I had built over the past 2 years for struggling students. The system I had quietly tested and refined in my classroom. At the bottom corner of each slide was a name. Ms. Rania. I felt my fingers curl slightly against the edge of the chair. The district supervisor nodded approvingly. Excellent innovation. This aligns perfectly with our upcoming statewide initiative. Statewide. The word echoed softly in my mind. The principal smiled. She's been instrumental in modernizing our approach. Instrumental. No one looked at me. For a moment, I considered speaking. The room smelled faintly of coffee and dry markers. Papers rustled. Pens tapped lightly. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary setting. Would my voice even land in this space? I inhaled slowly, while letting the air settle in my lungs. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I opened my folder. Inside were printed drafts, email timestamps, early proposal submissions, documents with dates attached months before Miss Rania had even joined the school. I didn't raise my hand. I simply slid one paper forward across the table. The supervisor glanced down. The room grew quiet, not loudly, but in that subtle way when attention shifts without permission. This appears to be earlier drafts, he said carefully. Yes, I replied, keeping my tone steady. They are. The principal shifted in his seat. We collaborate here. It's a team effort. I looked at him calmly. I agree, I said. That's why attribution matters. No accusation, no raised voice, just a sentence placed gently between us. And the supervisor examined the dates more closely. The timeline was clear, too clear to ignore. Silence can be heavier than confrontation. Ms. Rania cleared her throat. We discussed these ideas informally. We discussed general strategies, I answered. The framework was mine. My heartbeat was steady now, not racing, not shaking. Have you ever realized that the fear of speaking is often louder than the act itself? The supervisor closed the folder slowly. We will review this further, he said. The meeting ended sooner than planned. As we stood to leave, the principal avoided my eyes. Ms. Rania walked out quickly, heels clicking faster than usual against the tile floor. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Something had shifted, not loudly, but permanently. The days after the meeting were quieter than I expected. No confrontation. No dramatic apology, just a subtle tightening in the atmosphere. The principal stopped assigning me extra tasks. Ms. Rania kept her classroom door closed more often. Conversations in the staff room dipped in volume when I entered, then resumed carefully. A week later, an official memo arrived from the district office. Framework under review. 2 days after that, another email followed. Statewide teacher recognition ceremony, final nominees announced. My name was listed. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The letters looked unfamiliar together, like they belonged to someone else. I didn't tell my parents immediately. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I went to class the next morning and taught a lesson on persuasive writing. Your words matter, I told the students, or even if people ignore them at first. Was I speaking to them? Or to myself? When the formal invitation arrived, it mentioned something unexpected. The governor would be announcing the award recipients personally. The ceremony would be televised. I stared at that sentence longer than the rest. The auditorium on the day of the event smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. Teachers from across the state sat in neat rows, adjusting scarves and jackets, rehearsing small smiles. I sat still. No flashy outfit, no dramatic transformation. Just my cleanest cream-colored kurta and the same steady posture I had practiced for years in classrooms. When my name was called, the applause felt distant at first, like it was happening underwater. Then I heard it clearly. Yao for her innovative literacy framework that has improved outcomes across multiple districts. My framework. The governor stepped forward, hand extended. Teachers like you, he said into the microphone, are the quiet backbone of this state. The words echoed through the hall. Quiet backbone. I didn't look toward the cameras. I didn't search the audience. I simply accepted the certificate with steady hands. Sometimes recognition doesn't need to be chased. It arrives when you stop shrinking. After the ceremony, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Missed calls, messages, news clips circulating online. One notification stood out. My father. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. His voice sounded different. We saw you, he said softly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. My father cleared his throat before speaking again. We didn't realize, he said carefully. We didn't know it was this. This, as if the word could hold everything that had happened over the years. My mother's voice came faintly from the background. Tell her we're proud. Proud. The same people who had introduced me in banquet halls as just a simple teacher were now replaying a televised ceremony in their living room. I leaned against the cool wall of the auditorium hallway and closed my eyes for a moment. Thank you, I said quietly. There was a pause on the line. Heavy, expectant. Perhaps they were waiting for me to fill it with gratitude, with relief, with a softened version of myself. But something inside me had already settled. I've always loved what I do, I added gently, whether it was on a stage or in a classroom. Silence again. Have you ever noticed how some apologies are hidden inside pride? After the call ended, I stood there watching other teachers take photos with their certificates. Laughter echoed lightly through the corridor. The scent of jasmine from the flower arrangements lingered in the air. Mrs. Halima approached me with a warm smile. I knew, she said simply. About what? That you didn't need to prove anything. The right room's open eventually. Her words didn't feel dramatic. They felt factual. Over the next few weeks, the story circulated more than I expected. The district released an official statement acknowledging the framework's original development timeline. The earlier presentation credits were revised quietly. No public scandal. No loud correction. Just updated records. Miss Rania avoided direct eye contact. But one afternoon she stopped by my classroom. I didn't mean for it to escalate, she said, hands clasped tightly. I thought we were collaborating. I studied her expression. It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was discomfort. We were, I replied calmly, until my name disappeared. She nodded slowly. Sometimes people don't realize the line they've crossed until it's drawn clearly in front of them. Back at school, nothing changed dramatically. The corridors still smelled of chalk. The bell still rang too loudly. Students still forgot their homework. But something inside me was lighter. Not because of the award, not because of the governor's words. Because I had finally stopped measuring myself through other people's approval. My parents invited me to dinner the following Sunday. The table was set carefully. My favorite dishes were arranged neatly. My father spoke about the ceremony as if he had been there in the front row. My mother showed me screenshots she had saved from the televised broadcast. You looked confident, she said softly. I looked at her across the table. I was, I answered. There was no edge in my voice. No need to remind them of past words. The memory of those banquet hall comments didn't burn anymore. They simply existed as part of the timeline. Like anyone who has ever felt overlooked, I had once believed recognition would change everything. But it didn't change who I was. It revealed it. On my walk home that night, the air felt cool and steady against my face. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. I thought about the students who would enter my classroom the next morning. I'm unaware of televised ceremonies or district memos. They would just see me, their teacher, and that was enough. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been reduced to a label that didn't fit, take a moment to like this video and share your experience below. Sometimes hearing each other's quiet journeys reminds us we're not alone. I didn't win because I became louder. I won because I remained steady. This was just the beginning of my quiet strength. What would you do if the world called you simple? Comment below.